The morning sun was shining brightly over the city, reflecting off the massive glass windows of the high-end car dealership. Inside, the air smelled of rich coffee and expensive leather polish. The floors were so clean you could see your reflection in them, and every car on the showroom floor was polished to a mirror shine. This was a place where people came to dream about speed and luxury, and more importantly, a place where the sales staff could make their yearly commissions in a single afternoon. The dealership manager stood on a raised platform near the back, looking out over his kingdom. He was a man who believed deeply in appearances. To him, a suit wasn't just clothes, it was a uniform of success. He watched his team moving around like sharks, circling the customers who walked in. He prided himself on running a tight ship. If someone didn't look like they had $1 million in the bank, he didn't want them wasting the time of his top salespeople. It was around 10 in the morning when the automatic glass doors at the front slid open. A man walked in, and almost immediately, he stood out like a sore thumb. He wasn't dressed in a sharp suit or designer jeans. Instead, he wore a worn-out, navy blue baseball cap pulled down low over his eyes. His jacket looked like it had seen a few too many winters, and his jeans were faded and comfortable, rather than stylish. He carried a small backpack over one shoulder and looked around the showroom with quiet eyes. The manager up on the platform narrowed his gaze. He didn't like what he saw. In his experience, people who dressed like that were either there to ask for free water, look at cars they couldn't afford, or just kill time on a hot day. He watched the visitor closely, waiting for him to approach a receptionist, but the man just kept walking. He moved slowly, his hands tucked into his pockets, strolling past the gleaming sports cars as if he were in a library rather than a car showroom. What the manager didn't notice, or chose to ignore, was the way the man looked at the machines. While other customers were loud, tapping on the glass and sitting in the driver's seats just to take selfies, this visitor was different. He stopped in front of a sleek, silver muscle car. He didn't touch it. He just stood there, admiring the curve of the hood and the shape of the headlights. He tilted his head slightly, appreciating the engineering, the way an artist looks at a painting. There was a genuine respect in his posture. A few salespeople walked past him, offering tight, fake smiles before moving on to a better-dressed couple who had just walked in. They assumed he was a looker and not a buyer. It's a judgment that happens in sales every day, but it was particularly harsh today. The visitor didn't seem to mind the cold shoulder. He was used to going unnoticed. He enjoyed the peace and quiet of the morning. He moved from the silver car to a black sedan parked near the window. He nodded slowly, as if approving of the design. Up on the platform, the manager's irritation was growing. He hated seeing clutter on his floor. To him, this man in the scruffy jacket was messing up the perfect image of the dealership. He was worried that a real client, someone with money, might walk in and see this guy wandering around and think the place wasn't exclusive anymore. It was an irrational fear, but it was eating away at him. The manager watched as the visitor walked toward the back of the showroom, toward the most exclusive section. This area was roped off slightly, containing the fastest and most expensive cars in the building. The visitor didn't cross the velvet rope, but he stood right at the edge, looking at a matte black supercar that sat like a predator in the corner. "I'll give him 2 minutes before he tries to touch the paint," the manager muttered to himself, checking his expensive watch. But the visitor surprised him. He kept his hands strictly to himself. He just watched the car, absorbing the details. There was something humble about him, something grounded that clashed with the flashy, aggressive energy of the showroom. He seemed like a man who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. However, the manager's patience had run out. He decided he had to intervene. He straightened his tie and checked his reflection in a nearby chrome pillar. He wasn't going to be rude, at least not yet. He was just going to let this ordinary man know that he didn't belong here. He wanted to protect his business and his brand. In his mind, he was doing the right thing by maintaining the standards of the dealership. He began to walk down the stairs, his shoes clicking sharply on the floor, cutting a path straight toward the man in the baseball cap. The visitor, sensing someone approaching, turned around. He didn't look nervous or guilty. He just looked at the manager with a calm, neutral expression. He didn't know he was about to be kicked out. He didn't know he was being judged solely by the clothes on his back. He was just a man admiring a car on a Tuesday morning, unaware that he was about to teach everyone in the room a very expensive lesson about respect. The manager walked across the polished floor with a purpose that made the younger salespeople step out of the way. His shoes made a sharp clicking sound against the tiles, a rhythm that seemed to say, "Important business is happening here." As he got closer to the man standing by the matte black car, he straightened his suit jacket and put on a smile. It wasn't a warm smile, though. It was the kind of smile you use when you are about to tell someone something they don't want to hear, but you want to pretend you are being nice about it. When the manager reached the stranger, he didn't offer a handshake. Instead, he stopped just a little too close, invading the personal space of the man in the baseball cap. The stranger turned around slowly. He didn't look annoyed or intimidated, he just looked at the manager with a calm, quiet face, waiting to see what he wanted. "Can I help you with something?" the manager asked. His tone was light, but his eyes were scanning the stranger up and down, checking the worn jacket and the old jeans again. The stranger nodded his head toward the car behind him. "I was just looking at this one. It's a beautiful machine. I was wondering if you have the specs on the engine upgrade." The manager let out a short, dry laugh. He looked over at a group of other salespeople standing nearby and raised an eyebrow, as if to say, "Can you believe this guy?" Then he turned back to the stranger. "Look, this is a very high-performance vehicle. It is not something you just look at for fun. The specs are available on our website for serious inquiries." "I am serious," the stranger said softly. His voice was deep but gentle. "I'm thinking about buying a car today. I've always liked the design of this model." The manager's smile faded just a little. He was used to people bluffing, but he hated it when he thought someone was lying to his face. He crossed his arms over his chest, making himself look bigger. "Buying a car today, you know the price range on these vehicles, right? We are talking about a significant investment. We don't do any financing here for, well, let's just say we have strict criteria." The stranger didn't flinch. He didn't get angry. He just reached into his pocket. For a second, the manager wondered if he was going to pull out a weapon, and he took a tiny step back. But the stranger only pulled out a simple phone. He tapped the screen a few times and then looked back up. "I understand the price," the stranger said. "I was actually hoping to pay cash. It saves time with the paperwork." The silence that followed was heavy. The manager stared at him, then looked at the phone in his hand, and then back at his dirty jeans. The idea that this man, who looked like he had just come from fixing a car rather than buying one, could afford to pay cash for a supercar seemed ridiculous to the manager. It felt like a joke. It felt like the stranger was mocking him. "Look, pal," the manager said, dropping the polite act completely. His voice got louder. A couple near the entrance turned to look. "I don't know who you think you are, or what kind of game you are playing. but I've been in this business for 20 years. I know buyers, and I know tire kickers. You are wasting my time and you are wasting the space on this floor." The stranger tilted his head to the side, looking confused. "I'm not trying to waste your time. I just wanted to ask about the car." "You don't belong here," the manager said, pointing a finger toward the glass doors. "This is a place for people who appreciate quality and have the means to afford it. Look at you. You look like you haven't slept in a week. You're wearing a hat inside. It's disrespectful." A few of the sales staff stopped what they were doing. They were watching the scene now, feeling uncomfortable. They knew their boss had a temper, but this seemed harsh even for him. The stranger didn't fight back. He didn't shout. He just looked at the manager with a kind of sad look, as if he felt sorry for him. "Okay," the stranger said simply. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble." "You are causing trouble by walking in here dressed like that and acting like you own the place," the manager snapped. He was on a roll now, and his ego wouldn't let him stop. He felt like he had to assert his dominance, to show everyone that he was the one in charge. "Do everyone a favor and leave. Go to a used car lot down the street. That is more your speed." The stranger stood there for a moment longer. He looked at the matte black car one last time, as if saying goodbye to an old friend. Then he looked back at the red-faced manager. "You have a nice day," the stranger said quietly. He turned to walk away. "Oh, I will," the manager called out after him, his voice echoing in the showroom. "As soon as the trash is taken out." It was a terrible thing to say. The customers who were browsing stopped touching the cars. The air in the showroom, which had smelled like expensive coffee and success moments ago, suddenly felt stale and ugly. The stranger didn't turn around. He just kept walking toward the exit, his head down, his hands in his pockets. The manager stood there, puffing out his chest, thinking he had won. He thought he had protected his dealership from someone who didn't deserve to be there. He turned to his staff, clapping his hands together once. "All right, show's over. Everyone back to work. We have real clients to help." But the mood had been broken. The staff glanced at the doors where the stranger had just exited, and then they looked at their boss with different eyes. They saw a man who was small inside, no matter how nice his suit was. The manager, blinded by his own judgment, didn't see the looks his staff gave him. He just smoothed down his tie and walked back toward his office, convinced that he had done the right thing, completely unaware that he had just made the biggest mistake of his career. The manager stood in the center of the showroom floor, watching the stranger walk toward the glass doors. For a moment, he thought he would feel relief. He thought that getting rid of the distraction would make everything go back to normal. But as he watched the man's retreating back, a strange feeling of dissatisfaction gnawed at him. The stranger hadn't argued. He hadn't gotten angry. He had just accepted the insult and walked away with a quiet dignity that made the manager's victory feel hollow. The manager hated that. He wanted to prove he was in charge, not just to the stranger, but to everyone watching. He felt a sudden, burning need to assert his dominance one last time. He turned his head sharply toward the security guard, a tall man standing by the elevators who looked bored but alert. The manager pointed a finger at him and made a frantic gesture, signaling him to come over. The guard nodded slowly and walked across the floor, his uniform crisp. The manager met him halfway, speaking in a low, urgent voice. "I want you to escort him out," the manager hissed, his eyes darting around to make sure no customers were too close. "Actually, wait. Follow him out to the parking lot. Make sure he doesn't try to get into any cars that aren't his. He looks suspicious. I don't want him coming back in here and bothering my real clients." The security guard looked over at the doors, then back at the manager. "Sir, he's already leaving. He didn't touch anything. He was just looking." "Did you hear what I said?" the manager snapped, his face turning a shade redder. "He's loitering. It's my job to protect this dealership. Go make sure he leaves the property." The guard hesitated. He was a decent man, and he hadn't liked the way the manager had talked to the visitor. The visitor had seemed polite, if a bit scruffy. But the guard needed his job, and arguing with the angry manager wasn't worth the trouble. "Yes, sir," he said reluctantly and turned toward the exit. Inside the showroom, the atmosphere had turned sour. The customers who had been browsing moments ago were now awkwardly pretending to look at their phones or inspecting tires very closely. No one wanted to make eye contact with the manager. A saleswoman standing near a red sports car shook her head slightly. She felt a knot of embarrassment in her stomach. She had seen how the man looked at the cars. It was the look of a true enthusiast. She couldn't understand why her boss had been so cruel. But she stayed silent. In that room, silence was survival. Outside, the automatic doors slid open, and the security guard stepped out into the bright sunlight. The stranger was walking slowly across the pavement, heading toward the street. He didn't have a car parked out front, which seemed to amuse the manager watching from inside. The guard caught up to him just a few steps away from the main entrance. "Sir," the guard said, trying to sound firm but not aggressive, "I'm going to need to ask you to leave the premises completely. Please don't try to re-enter the showroom." The stranger stopped and turned around. The sun was behind him, making it hard for the guard to see his eyes clearly under the brim of the cap. But the stranger's face was relaxed. He didn't look offended by the guard's presence. "It's okay," the stranger said, his voice carrying a note of understanding. "I'm leaving. I have no intention of going back in there." He gestured vaguely down the road. "I'm actually meeting a friend a few blocks away. Just taking a walk." The guard nodded, feeling relieved. "Okay. Have a good day, sir." "You too," the stranger replied. He offered a small, genuine smile. It was the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the world at that moment. Then, he adjusted his backpack and continued walking down the sidewalk, blending into the flow of the city. Inside, the manager was watching from the window, a smug grin finally returning to his face. He turned back to the room, clapping his hands loudly to break the silence. "All right? Show's over. Let's get back to work. We have quotas to hit." He strutted back toward his office, feeling like he had successfully defended his fortress. He believed he had taught a lesson about standards and expectations. But as the doors clicked shut and the air conditioning hummed quietly, the energy in the room didn't bounce back. It stayed flat and uncomfortable. The salespeople moved like robots, going through the motions but lacking their usual enthusiasm. The incident had left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. It felt wrong. It felt like they had just witnessed a bully kicking a puppy. A young woman sitting at the front desk, who worked as a receptionist, stared at the door through which the stranger had disappeared. She chewed on her lip, her mind racing. There was something about him that was nagging at her. The way he moved. The shape of his jawline when he looked up. The sound of his voice. It was familiar. It was achingly familiar, but she just couldn't place it. She pulled her tablet closer, her fingers hovering over the screen. "I know I've seen him before," she whispered to herself. She didn't want to annoy the manager, who was now pacing behind the glass walls of his office, so she kept her head down. She opened a web browser and typed in a vague description of the man. Actor, scruffy beard, baseball cap. She hit search. A page of random celebrity photos came up, but none of them looked quite right. She felt silly. Maybe she was just imagining things. It had been a weird morning. Then, she remembered the specific way he had looked at the matte black car. There was a video she had seen a few months ago, a video of a famous Hollywood star who loved cars and motorcycles. She typed the star's name into the search bar along with motorcycle Los Angeles. The screen loaded, and she tapped on the Images tab. The first photo was of the star riding a sleek motorcycle. He was wearing a helmet, but the photo next to it showed him without it. He was wearing a plain t-shirt and had a gentle, tired smile. The receptionist froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked from the screen to the glass doors, and then back to the screen. She zoomed in on the photo. The eyes. The nose. The shape of the mouth. It was a perfect match. "Oh my God," she breathed out loud. The saleswoman standing nearby heard her and looked over, confused. "What is it?" the saleswoman whispered, stepping closer to the desk. The receptionist turned the tablet around so the other woman could see. Her hands were shaking slightly. I think that was him." The saleswoman leaned in, her eyes going wide as she looked at the photo, then back at the empty parking lot outside. The realization hit them both like a bucket of ice water. They hadn't just kicked out an ordinary man. They hadn't just kicked out a bum. They had humiliated one of the most famous, most beloved actors in the world. A man known for being kind, for donating his money to charity, and for treating everyone with respect. The receptionist quickly minimized the window as the manager walked out of his office, but the damage was done. The secret was about to explode, and the calmness of the dealership was about to be shattered forever. The manager walked past them, whistling, completely oblivious to the storm that was coming. He thought he had won, but he had actually just set a fire that he couldn't put out. The whisper spread through the showroom faster than a wildfire in a dry field. It started with the receptionist and the saleswoman, but within minutes, every staff member knew. They were huddling in small groups near the desks, hiding behind tall displays of brochures, their faces pale with a mixture of shock and excitement. The energy in the room had completely shifted. Just moments ago, everyone felt embarrassed and awkward because of the manager's behavior. Now, they felt something much sharper: fear. They realized they had just witnessed a PR disaster of massive proportions. One of the younger salesmen pulled out his phone and typed the actor's name into a search engine. The results flooded the screen. Movie posters, magazine covers, and red carpet photos. There was no denying it. The jawline, the nose, the gentle eyes, it was the same man who had just been pushed out the door. The salesman zoomed in on a photo taken recently of the actor riding a motorcycle. He was wearing a similar jacket and a cap. It was undeniable. "Guys," the salesman whispered to the group gathered around him. "He said he was going to pay cash. We heard him say that. This guy is worth millions. He could have bought the entire showroom floor without blinking." The realization hit everyone like a heavy weight. The manager hadn't just kicked out a random person. He had insulted a global superstar. A man known as one of the nicest people in Hollywood. The staff knew how the internet worked. They knew that if this story got out, and it would get out, their dealership would be the laughing stock of the country. No one would want to buy a car from a place that treated people that way. Meanwhile, the manager was sitting in his glass-walled office, completely unaware of the storm brewing outside. He was leaned back in his leather chair, sipping a fresh cup of coffee. He felt good. He felt powerful. In his mind, he had done exactly what a good manager should do: protect the brand image. He looked out at the floor and saw his staff huddled together. He frowned, assuming they were gossiping or slacking off. He stood up and walked to the door, swinging it open with a bang. The sound made the staff jump. They quickly tried to hide their phones and look busy, straightening ties and picking up random papers, but the tension was thick in the air. The manager walked onto the floor, his hands clasped behind his back. "Okay, break it up," he announced, his voice loud and commanding. "I don't pay you to stand around and socialize. We have a business to run. That distraction is gone, so let's get back to work." The staff exchanged nervous glances. The receptionist looked at the saleswoman, silently begging her to be the one to speak up. The saleswoman took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. She knew the manager had a terrible temper, but she also knew he needed to know the truth before he dug the hole any deeper. "Sir," she said, stepping forward. Her voice was shaking. "Can we talk to you for a second?" The manager stopped and looked at her, annoyed. "What is it? If this is about that guy outside, I don't want to hear it. He was wasting our time. End of story." "Sir, please," the receptionist said, walking over to join them. She held her tablet against her chest like a shield. "We recognized him. We looked him up. You need to see this." The manager rolled his eyes so hard it looked like they hurt. He let out an exaggerated sigh. "I don't have time for your celebrity spotting games. Just because someone looks vaguely familiar doesn't mean we roll out the red carpet. We run a serious business here." "It's not a game," the salesman spoke up from the back of the group, finding a sudden burst of courage. It was him. It was Keanu Reeves. The manager froze. He stared at the salesman, his mouth opening slightly as if to laugh, but no sound came out. He stood there for a beat, processing the name. It sounded familiar, of course. Everyone knew the name. But his brain refused to connect the movie star to the man in the dirty jacket. He shook his head firmly. "Don't be ridiculous," the manager snapped, though a flicker of doubt had appeared in his eyes. "Why would Keanu Reeves be walking in here dressed like a homeless person without an entourage, without a press team? He's probably just a look-alike. Or a prankster." "He wasn't a prankster, sir," the saleswoman insisted. She walked up to him and turned the tablet around. She tapped the screen, pulling up a side-by-side photo. On the left was a high-definition studio shot of the actor. On the right was a screenshot from a news article taken just a few days ago. He was wearing the exact same baseball cap and the same worn-out leather jacket. The manager stared at the screen. His eyes darted back and forth between the two photos. The shape of the nose. The intensity of the eyes. The way the hair fell out from under the cap. It was an exact match. He said he wanted to pay cash," the manager whispered, almost to himself. The memory came flooding back. The calm voice. The lack of fear. The quiet dignity when he was insulted. The manager's face began to turn from red to a ghostly white. "He was looking at the black supercar," the salesman added quietly. "That car is over $200,000. He wasn't joking, sir. He was going to buy it." The manager felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. He grabbed the edge of a nearby car display to steady himself. His heart hammered against his ribs. The realization washed over him like a cold wave. He hadn't just protected his dealership. He had insulted a beloved icon. He had turned away a guaranteed massive sale. And worse, he had done it in front of his entire staff and several other customers. Just then, the automatic doors opened. A customer who had been browsing earlier came back in, but he wasn't looking at cars. He was holding his phone up, recording a video of the showroom. He walked right up to the group. "Hey," the customer said, pointing his phone at the manager. "Is it true did you just kick out Keanu Reeves? People on Twitter are saying he's walking down the street right now looking at a bike shop." The manager stared at the camera lens. He couldn't breathe. The walls of the dealership felt like they were closing in on him. He tried to speak, tried to deny it, tried to make a joke, but his throat was dry and tight. He looked at the terrified faces of his staff, then back at the damning photo on the tablet. There was no going back. The ordinary man was a superstar, and the manager had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The manager stared at the camera lens pointing at his face, the small red light recording his expression of pure panic. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. He wanted to shout, to deny it, to tell the customer to put the phone away and get out, but he knew it was useless. The realization had already taken root in his mind, growing like a poisonous weed. The ordinary man was Keanu Reeves? The man he had insulted, mocked, and kicked out was a global icon. "Get that thing out of my face," the manager finally managed to squeak, his voice cracking. He turned away sharply, his face burning hot with a mixture of shame and anger. The customer laughed, a dry, humorless sound, and lowered the phone, but the damage was done. The video was already recording. The manager knew that within minutes, it wouldn't just be on one phone, it would be on the internet for the whole world to see. He stormed back toward his office, his legs feeling heavy and unsteady. As he walked through the showroom, he could feel the eyes of his staff boring into his back. No one was pretending to work anymore. They were all watching him. The whispers were getting louder. He heard the word lawsuit floating in the air. He heard the word idiot. These were people he had bullied and bossed around for years, and now, he could feel their judgment weighing down on him. He had lost all respect in a single morning. Once inside the safety of his glass office, he slammed the door shut and locked it, as if that could keep out the reality of what he had done. He walked over to his window and looked out, expecting to see the street empty, but instead, he saw a crowd gathering. People were stopping on the sidewalk, pointing at the dealership, and looking at their phones. The news was traveling faster than he could process. The modern world was relentless. The manager sat down heavily in his leather chair and turned on his computer. His hands were trembling so badly that he could barely type the password into the keyboard. When he finally logged in, he went straight to the dealership's social media page. His heart stopped when he saw the notifications. Thousands of comments were flooding in every second. "Shame on you. How dare you treat him like that? I was going to buy a car there next week. Not anymore. Keanu Reeves is a saint, and you guys are bullies." The one-star reviews were piling up like cars in a traffic jam. The reputation he had tried so hard to protect, the elite image, the luxury brand, was being destroyed in real time. And it was all because of his own arrogance. He put his head in his hands, rubbing his temples. He felt sick to his stomach. He knew he had made a terrible mistake, but he didn't know how to fix it. How do you apologize to the whole world? Suddenly, the landline phone on his desk rang, shattering the silence in the room. The harsh sound made him jump. He stared at the phone, knowing exactly who it was. It was the owner. The manager let it ring a few times, trying to compose himself, trying to think of an excuse. But there was no excuse. He took a deep breath and picked up the receiver. "Hello," he said, his voice weak. "What have you done?" The owner's voice boomed through the speaker. It wasn't a question, it was a roar of fury. "I am watching the video right now. You kicked out Keanu Reeves. Are you insane?" "Sir, I didn't know," the manager stammered. He looked homeless. "I was trying to protect the brand image." "You destroyed the brand image," the owner shouted back. "Every news outlet is calling me. We are going to be a joke. Do you know how much money you just cost us?" He was going to pay cash. He is a billionaire in his own right? And you kicked him out because of his clothes? "I'm sorry, sir. I really am." "I don't want your sorry," the owner said coldly. "I want you out. Don't bother packing your personal things. Just hand in your badge and get out of my building before I come down there and drag you out myself." The line went dead. The beep tone was the only sound left in the room. The manager slowly placed the phone back on the cradle. It was over. His career, his livelihood, his pride all gone in 1 hour of stupidity. He stood up, feeling numb. He grabbed his suit jacket from the back of his chair and put it on, though he felt cold inside. He walked out of his office for the last time. The showroom floor was dead silent. The staff stood still, watching him walk the long path to the front door. No one said goodbye. No one looked sad to see him go. The saleswoman who had tried to warn him simply shook her head slowly. The receptionist looked down at her desk. They didn't need to say anything, their faces said it all. He had been the boss, but today, he was the failure. He pushed the glass doors open and stepped out into the sunlight. The air outside felt fresh, but to him, it felt suffocating. He walked toward the parking lot where his own car was parked. As he passed the entrance, he noticed a large television screen mounted in a shop window across the street. It was playing a news loop. The manager stopped and looked up. There on the screen was a grainy video of the incident. He saw himself shouting, pointing his finger, his face red and angry. Then, the camera cut to a different scene. It was footage from a few blocks away. It showed the man he had kicked out. The man he now knew was Keanu Reeves. The actor was standing by a motorcycle, smiling at a young fan who had stopped him. He was signing an autograph. He looked happy, free, and kind. Seeing that image broke something inside the manager. He realized the deep irony of the situation. He had spent his life chasing money, wearing expensive suits, and judging people by how they looked. He thought he was better than everyone else. Yet, the man he had looked down on, the man in the scruffy clothes, was rich, famous, and, most importantly, a good human being. The actor hadn't shouted back. He hadn't caused a scene. He had just walked away with dignity. The manager stood there on the sidewalk, wearing his expensive suit that suddenly felt like a costume. He watched the screen for a long moment, feeling the weight of his own arrogance crushing him. People walked past him, rushing to get to the dealership to see if the rumors were true, completely ignoring the man standing alone in the suit. He turned away from the screen and walked toward his car. He had a long drive home to figure out what to do next, but he knew one thing for sure. He would never look at an ordinary man the same way again. The world had taught him a harsh lesson today, True class isn't about the clothes you wear or the car you drive. It's about how you treat others, even when no one is watching. And for the manager, that lesson had cost him everything.